Well, it's just me tonight, and I'm thinking out loud. This is the 27th of July, 2024. It's been a really tumultuous month, but that's not where I want to begin. First of all, I want to thank all of you who have followed this show and followed me over the years. It's very much appreciated. I have never done anything or put anything I've done behind a paywall, and I never will. So I want to thank you for following me, for commenting, and for sticking with me through some very difficult times. You know, like many Americans, I was a patriotic American. I believed in freedom. I believed in democracy. I actually believed that the United States was spreading freedom and democracy around the world. My first wake-up call, and I think most of you who are watching now probably have had that wake-up call in your own way, but my first wake-up call came in 1968 when I went to Rome to study theology. I was living in an international house with the Carmelite Fathers in Rome, Italy. And for the first time in my life, I met people from around the world who did not think that America was the greatest country in the world, who did not think that America was exceptional, the exceptional nation. Oh, they all liked many things about America. They liked the movies, they liked the music, they liked Hollywood. They liked what they thought was life in America. But they also made it very clear to me that there was much about America that they didn't like. They put it right in front of my face. The genocide that the white colonial explorers and later the United States of America committed and killed millions and millions of original people, Native Americans in North and South America. They held up in my face slavery, prejudice against Black American people. And that was the time of the Vietnam War. And they held that up in my face as well. In those 4 years in Rome, I came to realize that everything I thought was great about America really was great about all these countries in Europe that I visited, all these countries from around the world who sent their young students and priests to study in Rome. They were just as advanced in every way, and they were far more intelligent and educated than I was, and most of us in the United States. That was the first wake-up call. I returned to the United States in 1972, and I served as a priest in Arizona for 14 years. It was at that time that I realized that the mission that I was on was a myth. I realized that the church that I thought I belonged to was nothing more than a hierarchical structure whose goal was to control people, control the way they think. And if you didn't conform, you were excommunicated. The second wake-up call. I no longer believed in that institution. And years went by when I was struggling to earn a living and raise a family. And like everybody else, I didn't have a whole lot of attention to pay attention to what was really going on. I voted, got involved in political campaigns. And then I had the chance to go to Jeju Island in 2011. By that time, I was involved in filmmaking, and a peace group from San Francisco offered to pay part of my airfare to get to Jeju Island off the south coast of South Korea. I was supposed to do a 10 or 15 minute video about at that time, 7-year-long, 24/7 protest against the construction of a naval base to accommodate Obama's pivot to Asia. What it involved was the destruction of a 500-year-old farming and fishing village, the destruction of a UNESCO biosphere preserve, a pristine environment, and I spent a month there. At the end of the month, I went to visit a museum, the April 3rd Peace Museum in Jeju City, the northern part of Jeju Island. What this museum was a historical record, a remembrance of a horrible massacre that occurred on Jeju Island in 1946 and 1947, before the Korean conflict, where at the hands of the United States military government in Korea, somewhere between 30 and 60,000 peasants were massacred on that island in a free fire zone because they rose up against the American occupation of Korea after the end of World War II, when the Koreans, North and South, believed that they had been liberated from 37 years of brutal Japanese occupation, only to find out that they were now occupied and governed by the United States military command. And the United States military organized, funded, trained, and commanded the massacre of somewhere between 30 and 60,000 innocent peasants, rising up because they wanted to determine their own future, self-determination, freedom from colonialism, freedom from foreign domination. I was shocked. I cried at what I saw and I learned in this museum. And what came out of that was my first feature documentary, The Ghost of Jeju. By going there and by an intense 5 or 6 months of research, I came to realize for the first time in my life that America was not about spreading freedom and democracy. America was about colonial domination. The goal of America was full spectrum dominance on the land, on the seas, in the air above, and in space. That was my wake-up call. I didn't need another wake-up call experience. I was convinced at that time of the evil inclinations and goals of my country. and I became radicalized. I became a radical anti-American imperialism and domination, anti-American wars. I visited Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I met with people who survived the horrendous atomic bombings of those two cities. What later led me to Russia was the fear that I felt of a nuclear war between the United States and Russia. I lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis in the fall of 1962. The Bureau of Atomic Scientists had their doomsday clock set at 3 minutes to midnight. And that was in 2016. I had to come to Russia to find out for myself if these Russians were evil, if these Russians were a soulless pagan nation, if these Russians were bent on destroying the United States. When I returned, I completed my film, which I titled 30 Seconds to Midnight. At that time, in 2016 and 17, I believed that the doomsday clock, counting down to the end of life on the planet, a nuclear Armageddon, wasn't at 3 minutes, it was at 30 seconds. If I were to make that film today, and I am working on a revision, I would have entitled it The Final Countdown. We're at 5. That's how close we are today, because all of the threats and provocations of the United States, NATO, and the EU have enacted on Russia. After 2 more visits to Russia in 2018 and 2019, I decided to relocate to Yalta in the Crimea, where I have been living now since March of 2020, a little over 4 years. Because of the positions I have taken, because of the opinions I have expressed, and I would like to point out the facts that I have expressed in almost 500 films, short videos, and podcasts about what I have found in Russia, what I have seen with my own eyes and experienced in my own daily living. I have lost family, and I have lost dozens of friends who have basically written me off. I'm not alone. So where am I today? I wanted to share some thoughts as I think out loud, without a prepared script, about what's happening in our world today. I am more concerned and afraid today of a nuclear Armageddon that will end all life on the planet, because of the reckless provocations and threats of the United States of America on Russia. It could happen by accident tonight. Tomorrow morning, nobody would wake up. We would be nothing more than radioactive ash. So here we are, the 27th of July, 2024. The month of July. I haven't seen anything like this in my entire life. Let me begin with the attempted assassination of Donald Trump 2 weeks ago. I don't know whether this was staged. I don't know whether this was real. What I do know is there are a lot of questions that have to be answered. I lived through the John F. Kennedy assassination, the Martin Luther King assassination, the Bobby King assassination, the Malcolm X assassination. And now we've had another attempt, and Ronald Reagan attempted assassination, and now another attempt on a former president. I don't think that these questions are going to be answered. But what I predicted months ago, and I've stated on this show, and I posted on numerous Facebook and social media platforms months ago, that if these powerful forces who hate Trump, don't eliminate him before the election, should he be elected, they will definitely make another attempt on his life. This is the world we're living in. This is the political environment in the United States that is not one of respectful disagreement. It's one of anger and hatred at the other. That brings me to what happened just a week ago. Under enormous pressure, Joe Biden drops out of the race and immediately anoints Kamala Harris as the Democratic candidate for president. Who orchestrated that? Joe Biden didn't do that on his own. Joe Biden has not been in charge in the White House for the last 3.5 years. Who's running the White House? Is it Tony Blinken? Is it Jake Sullivan? Is it Kirby? Is it Austin? Is it Barack Obama? Who is it? It's obvious it's not Joe Biden. And to appoint and anoint Kamala Harris, whose popularity is so low, to carry the banner for the Democrats in the next election, this blows my mind. I haven't voted since the first time I voted for Obama. He was such a disappointment, such a chameleon, such a liar, such a warmonger, that since that time, I have given up on American elections and I have not voted. They're all rigged, they're all staged, and the candidates that are presented are the only ones that Americans are allowed to vote for. I know Jill Stein. I've interviewed Jill Stein on her previous attempts to become president of the United States. I was fortunate to spend 2.5 hours with her when the Green Party in Maine invited her to come to Maine to speak. They didn't have anybody that could pick her up at her home in Massachusetts. I was not a Green Party. I was no party. But I had a car, and I was covering the election. I was covering the Occupy movement. And they asked if I would go down to Massachusetts to pick her up. And I said, absolutely. 2 hours with her, 2.5 hours in her home, waiting for her to pack, and in the car coming back to Portland, Maine. She's the real deal. She was then, she is now. Does she have a chance? Not a prayer in heaven. The circus that Americans are being subjected to right now, politically, is insidious. I don't know how Americans, I don't know how they can accept this. What I think is going to happen, there may not even be an election. And if there is an election, and it's rigged, and it'll be obvious again, there'll be a revolution, a civil war in America. That's how deep-seated the anger, the animosity, and the hatred is right now. It's worse than during the war between the North and the South. Enough on that. Except to say that the Russian leadership knows, have stated clearly over and over again, it makes no difference who is in the White House. And that's a fact. Also, this past week, Bibi Netanyahu goes before Congress. It's not the first time he's been there with an overwhelming response. I couldn't bring myself to watch this, but several of my friends are bloggers and have posted articles and analysis of that event, which I've read. Some of them have posted clips of that speech, which I watched. Dozens of standing ovations for this cold-blooded, genocidal killer. I couldn't be more ashamed, more disgusted with the entire political class of the United States in the White House, in the Senate, and in the Congress. I don't know if my friends and former friends applaud like they're elected officials at that genocidal monster, but all of them have blood on their hands. I've covered the genocide in Gaza and Palestine. Israel was an illegally formed entity that has been committing genocide for all of these years. They have occupied Palestinian land. They have killed Palestinians. They have destroyed their olive groves. They have denied them water. And yet, the world stands by and allows this to continue. The United States of America stands alone with Israel on the world stage. The rest of the world knows that America is totally under the control of the Zionists. America continues to arm Israel with billions of dollars, 500-pound bombs, which Israel drops on defenseless, innocent people. Under the veil of we have a right to defend ourselves. They don't. The Palestinians are the ones who have the right to defend themselves from this genocidal Israeli entity. And that brings me to the Paris Olympics. Oh my goodness. The Israelis are participating with blood on their hands. They've got people on their football team who have served in the IDF, the Israeli military, and now they're allowed to take part. But Russians now have been banned from previous Olympics. First, it was drugs, illegal substances, proven to be bogus, when the rest of the world, especially the United States, has been doping for decades. And Russians are not allowed to participate under their own flag and with their own anthem. And yet these genocidal Israelis are allowed to participate. This is a blood-covered Olympics. I've been against the Olympics for many years. Why? Totally dishonest, totally commercialized, nothing to do with the amateurism, nothing to do with sportsmanship, nothing to do with peace and friendly competition between nations, nothing of the sort. At least since the time of 1939 in the Olympics in Berlin, when Hitler used it for propaganda. This isn't what really is bothering me about the Paris Olympics this time. It was the opening ceremony, which I didn't watch. I've not watched any Olympic Games at all for years and years and years. But the opening ceremony, again, Facebook, social media pages are covered with the filthy, satanic, Masonic opening ceremony. Symbolism for evil. Symbolism of Masonic symbols. What was happening in that ceremony was an attack on humanity, was an attack on the family, was an attack on traditional values. In your face. They didn't even attempt to hide it. And you wonder why Russia is the only country in the world defending itself from these American and European liberal values. The war against Russia has never been just about resources, just about land. It's been about values. It's been about religion. It's been about history. You see, Russia has formally, publicly rejected all of these United States Western liberal values. LGBTQ+. The agenda there is to destroy the family, to confuse people in terms of sexuality, to confuse people in terms of family values and bonding, the responsibility of father and mother to each other and to children, the responsibility of ancestors, the respect for ancestors, and the responsibility of children to protect and preserve with their lives these values. This is what the war has been all about. And this is the role that these Paris Olympics are playing in this war against Russia. Make no doubt about it. You know, I've been living under sanctions now. It's extremely difficult for a foreigner, an expat, an American, to get along here because of the sanctions the United States has placed on Russia and Crimea. But isn't it ironic? And they're not really reporting this, except to say that inflation is out of sight in Europe. Inflation is out of sight in the United States. The middle class is dwindling rapidly. But the World Bank, the IMF, other financial institutions have indicated publicly that the Russian economy has grown, has not been affected by the sanctions, has not been affected negatively by the war that's going on in Ukraine. It has actually grown, and it is now the 5th largest economy in the world. Wages for the middle class and upper middle class have gone up, primarily because of the high-tech and military-industrial complex jobs, which are plentiful, although Russia is not on a war economy, primarily because Russia is selling gas and oil all over the world at record numbers. This results in good-paying jobs. This results in the lowering of inflation, the lowering of people without jobs, joblessness. We are lacking nothing here in the local economy, from automobiles to high-tech televisions and computers to basic necessities of life. Food, which is pure, is in abundance. The shelves in the supermarkets are filled to overflowing. There's not a lack of anything here. And yet, if you're honest with yourself and you're living in Europe and you're living in the United States, you know that inflation is out of sight. You can't afford to pay for your utilities anymore. You can't afford to pay for your heating. You can't afford to fill your car's gas tank. You can't afford to take a vacation. You can't afford the rent. That's what the sanctions have done to you in America and you in Europe. And this brings me to the war in Ukraine. I have made videos detailing the provocations of the United States alone against Russia, dating back to Harry Truman when he dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, not to end the war, but to send a message to Stalin. The provocations and the threats have incrementally increased ever since that day, almost 80 years ago. The United States, under the command of Joseph Biden and Victoria Nuland and Jeffrey Pyatt, the then ambassador to Ukraine, funded and orchestrated the coup in 2014 that led to getting rid of Viktor Yanukovych, the democratically elected president, putting in Poroshenko, and then eventually Zelensky, and that led to the war on the Donbass, the two breakaway regions of Donetsk and Lugansk. 10 years now, non-stop bombarding and killing of innocent people and children and destroying civilian infrastructure. That's a genocide. When Putin was forced to respond to this aggression and was forced to respond to the United States and NATO and EU intentions of occupying Ukraine and making it a NATO member, that was the red line that Russia would not allow to be crossed. Russia has been provoked for all of these years. Its physical integrity, its sovereignty has been threatened and attacked, and it is continually attacked and escalated to this very day. There's been a lot of blah, 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 gibberish talk about, oh, Zelensky's ready to talk. China has been involved. The Pope has been involved. Poland has been involved. Hungary has been involved. Let me tell you something. Zelensky's peace plan is dead in the water. The day that Russia began the special military operation in February of 2022, over 4 years ago, Putin made it perfectly clear. Russia had three main goals: the demilitarization of Ukraine, the denazification of Ukraine, and to ensure that Ukraine never entered NATO and remained neutral. These three goals are non-negotiable. Russia has already said that the return of the Donbass, Zaporozhye, and Kherson, and Crimea are never going to happen. So what's the bottom line? The bottom line is that Russia, when it's ready, will determine and define the terms of any peace agreement. It will not be determined by the United States. It will not be determined by NATO. It will be determined by Russia. And for any of you out there who are wondering how it's going, the military operation, Russia is teaching NATO and the United States how warfare today, modern warfare, is being conducted. High-tech, hypersonic missiles, technologically advanced weaponry, drones, satellite communications, land-based radars, and the incessant, slow-paced, meat grinder approach of attrition is going on every single day. And the Russian military of defense has indicated that Ukraine is losing over 1,000 men a day just since January of this year. The numbers of killed in action and wounded is well over 600,000 and probably approaching 1 million. Ukraine has nobody else to call up. They're trying to bring in criminals to offer them freedom and a pardon if they go and fight, but they don't want to fight. 18-year-olds don't want to fight. They know that it's over. And what is really sad is that the United States continues not only to fund Ukraine with money to prop up their government, to prop up their salaries of government workers and pensioners, but with missiles that are capable of striking deep within the Russian Federation. I can tell you this, there aren't any Ukrainians that are capable of firing and directing and coordinating those long-range missiles. These are Americans, these are Germans, these are French. They are in Ukraine and have been and participating in this war directly. This is not a proxy war. This is a direct war between the United States, NATO, but led by France and Germany, against Russia. And Russia is winning. Russia does not have a timeline. Russia is moving at its own predetermined pace. Having learned lessons over the last 2 years, are now in full command and control of the battlefield. Meanwhile, the Russian economy is booming. Life is completely normal and natural here. People are going about their lives. We are going about their lives. In spite of the fact there's a war raging next door, people go to work. People are out and about with their children. It's summertime. They're on the beaches. They're taking vacations. We're going to concerts, to events. We're taking short trips to attend different cultural and historical events. Nobody's living in fear. There are no bomb shelters anywhere, in spite of the fact that almost daily these mercenaries, these U.S. and foreign troops are firing missiles and drones at strategic points in Crimea. Nobody's living in fear. I want to end on this note. What we have to do as a race of people is understand that it is our basic humanity that is under attack. The globalists, the Klaus Schwabs, the Bill Gates, the World Economic Forum, the Bilderberg billionaires, what their goal is to deny who we are as humans. This is what's at stake. It's being played out in the United States of America. It's being played out across Europe. It's being played out across the rest of the world. But what is encouraging is that the global South, Asia, and Russia are coming together to oppose this evil, satanic attempt to destroy who we are as sovereign nations, to destroy who we are as human beings. The BRICS Plus, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and others are joining together to defend the sovereignty of every country, to defend the history and the culture of every country and nation on this planet, to do away with war and conflict, to promote the strict adherence to international law and the principles of the United Nations Charter, to promote development for all peoples, to promote peace and prosperity. This is the hope. This is the hope that humanity in this planet has to survive this evil, satanic onslaught to destroy it. Those are my thoughts for tonight, July 27th, 2024. Thank you to those of you who have watched this.